You have lived inside the smell of salt and cedar and burning fish oil for all 37 years of your life, and you do not yet know that the city producing those smells will be physically removed from the earth in the next 3 days. Not captured, not changed, removed. The Romans are not coming to govern Carthage. They are coming to make certain that when they are finished, there is no surface left on which the word Carthage can be written. The population of your city is 400,000 people. The army surrounding it has been here for 3 years. You have survived 3 years. You went to sleep last night believing that survival was a skill you had mastered. You were wrong about what the morning would require. It is 146 BC, and you are standing in the Bursa, the hilltop district at the center of the city, and the eastern wall has been open since before dawn. You do not know this yet. What you know is that the fires in the harbor district have been burning since the middle of the night, and that they are moving in a direction fires do not usually move, toward you. You have watched fires in sieges before. Siege fires move toward supply lines, toward weak positions, toward whatever opens. This fire is moving toward the center, toward the hill, toward the place where the people who have not yet been killed have gathered, because it is the highest ground and the last ground and the ground you stand on when there is nowhere else. The Punic Wars lasted 118 years. Your grandfather was born into the second one. Your father survived the terms of the third. You were born into what was supposed to be peace, into a city stripped of its navy by treaty, forbidden from raising armies, forbidden from making war without Roman permission, governed by a council that answered to men in Rome who had never seen the harbor your city was built around. You grew up knowing the treaty. You grew up understanding that Carthage had agreed to survive within it. What you did not understand, what your father did not understand, what the council debating in the forum 6 months ago did not understand, is that survival was never actually on offer. Rome did not want Carthage compliant. Rome wanted Carthage gone. There's a difference, and the difference is 3 days. Scipio Aemilianus has been outside your walls for 3 years. His army is the size of a small nation. 50,000 soldiers, support staff, engineers who built their own city around yours while they waited. You have watched them from the walls. You have watched them work. The Romans are efficient in a way that carries no emotion. They build siege ramps and fill harbors and redirect supply lines the way a craftsman repairs a wheel, without drama, without pause. They are not angry at Carthage. That is the part that took 3 years to understand. And they are not punishing you. They are completing a task that was assigned before you were born. The Roman Senate voted on this while your mother was still pregnant with you. The phrase they used was Carthago delenda est. Carthage must be destroyed. It was not a battle cry. It was administrative language. The kind of language you use to describe a thing that has already been decided. You have a daughter. She's 9 years old, and she's been sleeping under the Bursa temple steps for 6 nights, because the building where you sheltered before that was no longer safe, and the one before that no longer standing. She knows how to read. You taught her yourself, the Punic letters, the ones your civilization invented and the Romans will salt into the ground until they cannot be recovered. She asked you 4 days ago when you were going home. You told her soon. You told her the Romans would stop. Children believe the things their parents say with enough certainty, and you had enough certainty left to make her believe it. You do not have that certainty now. The fires are 4 streets away and moving, and she is still sleeping, and you are watching the smoke above the roofline and doing the arithmetic that parents do in emergencies. The arithmetic where the numbers don't come out to anything survivable, but you keep running them anyway because stopping means something you cannot afford to mean. Hasdrubal the general surrendered to Scipio yesterday, privately, without announcement, with his wife and children and whatever he could carry. He went to the Roman camp and offered his submission in exchange for his life, and Scipio accepted it and gave him terms. And the men under his command who were still alive and still fighting in the streets of your city do not yet know that the man who told them to die for Carthage is currently eating Roman bread 2 miles away and contemplating what he will do with the small estate they are probably going to give him in the countryside of some province he has never visited. His wife found out before the fighters did. Hasdrubal's wife. History will remember her, though not by name. She stood on a rooftop with her children and she screamed down at her husband in the Roman camp. She called him a coward in front of Scipio. She took her children by the hand and walked back into the burning city. The fighters on the Bursa wall heard this, and they continued to fight. Not because anyone had ordered them to, because there was no longer any possible surrender that included them. Hasdrubal had used the only surrender. They were past the part of this that had terms. The Bursa holds 6 city blocks of buildings built up to 7 stories, streets so narrow 2 people cannot pass without turning sideways, stairways connecting rooftop to rooftop so that the whole district functions as a single defensive structure, a city above the city. The Romans have been taking it block by block for 6 days, 1 block per day. The method is to take the bottom floor, kill whoever is inside, set fire to the upper floors, wait for survivors to fall or jump, then cross to the next building. It is not efficient the way the Romans are usually efficient. It is efficient the way the end of something is efficient. It is what you do when speed no longer matters and thoroughness is the only value left. You have been moving for 6 days. You do not have a home anymore. You stopped thinking about the home 3 days ago, which surprised you. You thought losing the home would take longer to stop feeling like the most important thing, but when the second building burned, you understood that the home was no longer a category that applied to you. What applies to you now is the next 6 hours, then the next 6, then whatever is past that, if there is anything past that. Your daughter woke up 20 minutes ago. She has not asked about going home again. Children understand thresholds that adults cannot bring themselves to name. She is holding your hand with both of hers and watching the smoke with the specific concentration of a child who has decided that if she looks at the dangerous thing hard enough, she can make it make sense. It does not make sense. It will not. The Punic civilization is 4 centuries old. It built the trade routes that moved tin from Britain to Egypt, purple dye from the Levant to the Atlantic coast, grain from Sicilian fields to the cities of the known world. Your people invented the writing system that half the Mediterranean alphabet is derived from. Your city was the wealthiest port in the world for longer than the Roman Republic has existed. None of this is going to matter in 72 hours. The Romans will not preserve the record. The Romans are writing their own record, and in their record, Carthage will appear as a threat they neutralized, and a lesson they taught, and a place that is gone now because Rome decided it should be gone. That is the thing about being erased by a civilization rather than defeated by an army. The erasure includes the narrative. It includes who gets to say what happened and why and what it meant. Scipio Aemilianus will go home a hero. He will be given a triumph. He will walk through the streets of Rome, and behind him will be the proof that the task was completed. And in front of him will be everything Rome has decided to remember about why it was done. Your daughter does not appear in that story. The woman on the rooftop does not appear in that story. The 400,000 people who woke up 3 days ago believing they had survived the worst of it do not appear in that story. They appear in yours. You are still telling it. You are still inside it. The smoke is closer now, and she is holding your hand tighter now, and the arithmetic that never resolved is still running in whatever part of you runs things, even when you have told yourself to stop. You are 37 years old. You were born in the greatest trading city in the world. You taught your daughter to read in a language that has 11 more days before it becomes a dead language. The street you were born on does not exist anymore. The harbor your father worked is gone. The forum where the council argued about terms 3 months ago is burning. What exists is this: her hands and yours, the smoke above the last roofline, the sound of the city that made you, ending. You have nowhere to go. You're staying anyway. You're making the only choice left to someone who loves something that is being destroyed, which is to remain inside it until remaining is no longer possible. The Romans have a word for what they are doing here. They call it a necessity. You are standing inside what they have decided is necessary, and it feels like the world, because it was. Scipio watched the city burn on the last night. The historians recorded this. They recorded that he wept. Not because he was sentimental, because he was educated, and the educated Romans understood that what they were doing to Carthage, some future civilization would eventually do to Rome. He quoted Homer while the fire spread, the lines about the fall of Troy. He was watching Carthage and thinking about Rome's ending, and he said as much to the historian standing next to him, Polybius, who wrote it down. That is the kind of civilization Rome was, smart enough to understand exactly what it was doing, committed enough to do it anyway. The salt came after. The Romans salted the earth where Carthage had stood. This is one of those historical details that gets disputed by scholars, whether it happened precisely, whether the salt was symbolic, whether the phrasing is accurate. But what is not disputed is the intent. The intent was to signal permanence, to make a statement in the language of agriculture. This ground will not produce again. This place is not available for rebuilding. Whatever grew here, the growing is finished. You're not thinking about the salt yet. You're in the middle of the fire. The salt is 3 days away. What you have is right now, which is the smoke in her hands and the sound of a civilization that was 4 centuries old and is ending in the specific way all civilizations end, which is without warning and without the dignity of a clear final moment in the middle of ordinary people doing the ordinary thing of trying to get to the next hour. Your daughter says your name. She says it the way children say the names of parents when they want to be told something that will hold. You look at her. You do not have what she is asking for. You have never had less of it than right now. But you are her parent, and she is 9 years old, and you pull her closer into the smoke that smells like cedar and salt and burning, and you put your hand over her head, the way you have put your hand over her head, since she was a weight in your arms and the city was whole and the harbor was open and the world was still possible. The last citizens of Carthage did not know they were the last. That is not self-pity. That is the thing about endings. They do not announce themselves to the people inside them. The announcement comes later, from the outside, from the people who survived to write the record. What you have is not an announcement. What you have is the next 6 hours, and her, and the weight of a hand on a child's head in the middle of everything being taken. That is what it felt like to be the last. Not heroic, not historic, ordinary and irreplaceable and gone. There's a specific texture to the grief of people who lose everything at once, as opposed to people who lose things gradually. Gradual loss comes with the mercy of adjustment. Each thing that goes makes the next slightly less unimaginable. Total loss, sudden loss. The kind that takes the city and the harbor and the home and the form and the street you were born on, and the language your civilization speaks in the space of 3 days. That loss does not allow for adjustment. It arrives faster than the mind can metabolize it. What happens instead is a strange clarity. The things that mattered before the fire no longer feel like they mattered. The argument you had with your neighbor 3 months ago does not exist. The debt someone owed you, the slight that you were still carrying, gone, not resolved, simply too small to find in the space the fire has opened. What remains is the essential, the weight in your arms, the name she calls you, the hand over her head. You have been reduced to the irreducible, which turns out to be less than you thought it would be and more important than everything that was taken. The Punic people were not barbarians. This bears saying because Rome's record will say it differently. The Roman record will describe Carthage as a threat, as a rival, as the place that produced Hannibal, who crossed the Alps with war elephants and nearly broke the Republic in the Second War. And that is true. Hannibal did cross the Alps. Carthage was Rome's most formidable rival in 3 separate wars across 118 years. But the people inside the city were people. They had schools, they had a religious tradition, they had senators and councils and a legal system, they had poets whose work is lost because the Romans burned the libraries. They had agricultural manuals. One of them survived translation into Latin because the Romans found it useful. And that survival by usefulness is its own kind of comment on what it means for a civilization to be absorbed into a larger one. You are permitted to persist if you are useful. Your knowledge of farming survives, your language, your poetry, your history, your way of naming the world. That does not survive because it was not useful to the civilization that replaced you. Your daughter knows the Punic letters. She knows the stories that were told in those letters. She is 9 years old and she carries inside her the entire literary inheritance of a civilization. And there is no one left to receive it. That is what it means to be at the end of a line, not the dramatic death. The quiet closing of a transmission that has been running for 4 centuries and will stop here with her in the smoke because the people who would have received what she carries are not going to exist. She will not think of it in those terms. She is 9. She is thinking about you, about the smoke, about the next 6 hours, the same way you're thinking about the next 6 hours. She's not thinking about civilization. She is thinking about her father's hand on her head and whether it means what she needs it to mean, which is that the next 6 hours will contain her, that she will be inside them, that she will get to the one after,